Thank you, everybody. Please stay seated, please. Fine. Thank you so much, the Rockland Public Library. It's great to be here. Good to see you all. We're talking about birds and their sounds tonight. Let's go. I am contractually obligated to start here. Maine Audubon is the oldest and largest wildlife nonprofit in the state of Maine. We've been around since 1843, if you can believe it or not. We're a great organization. We have education programs like this one, and for thousands of kids and adults around the state, we have biologists on staff who are learning about populations of animals and how they're doing. And we have advocates like me who bring what we've learned from our scientists to Augusta and to DC to try to tell them how to protect wildlife. If you're not a member, we'd love to have you. We're having a 15% off optics sale at our centers sometime soon. I don't know the date. So I brought that with me, and I was supposed to talk about that. That's Maine Audubon. These are birds. Bird sounds. Okay. One of the main things here is that birds make a lot of different sounds. A lot of times when we think about the sounds that birds make, we think of one thing, we think of their song, beautiful song. That's just one of the many sounds that birds make, and we're going to be talking about all of them right here. The vast majority of vocalizations that birds make are not their songs, it's some other noise. And I put this slide up here. This was not taken in Maine. These are, of course, penguins. I think these are emperor penguins or king penguins, I'm not sure. But the reason I have this slide here, because this is one of the noisiest avian groupings you could ever think of. This sounds like chaos, but this is not a beautiful songscape. Right? This is a sort of a loud croaking nightmare, perhaps. One of the loudest places you can imagine, but not a typical bird song like we think of. And so what I'm going to start here is talk about the different types of noises that birds make. And we'll talk about the different ones. I have my phone here. I tested it before. We'll be able to hear some things. And my thing will kick me out for some reason. Well, that has never happened to me before. Hello, I'm Nick Lund, 1843. Birds make a lot of noise. Alarm calls. Oh, actually, what I need though, sorry. Whoa, spoiler alert. Hold on a sec. Holy cow. All right, please excuse me for 1 minute. I don't know what is going on, but I need the my notes down here, and because I like to see what slide is coming. Document recovery. Okay, hold on. Please bear with me.
Can we get a copy of your presentation?
Yeah, maybe. If I can get it. Hold on a second. There's this. What is happening here? I'm really sorry, everyone. Please bear with me. And I have it on this darn share screen thing. Okay, I'm back. 1843, alarm calls. We're back. Hey, everyone. Good to see you again. I'm Nick Lund from Maine Audubon. Hi, Zoom people. Is that you right there? Hello. One of the types of noises that birds make are alarm calls. And specifically, we are not talking about this Cooper's hawk standing triumphantly over the prey. We are talking about the prey, that little cedar waxwing down there. It's dangerous to be a bird. There's always something out to get you, whether it's a hawk or an owl or a cat or a fox, and you need to be alert. And one thing that birds do so a lot of predators like this Cooper's hawk use the element of surprise, right? Their whole deal is, I'm gonna wait here in the bushes, wait for this bird to be at a feeder or to be somewhere not looking, and then I'm gonna pounce. So the element of surprise is a major component of avian predators. And what birds want to do is ruin that element of surprise, right? One of the reasons that birds flock together is so they can keep an eye out for predators that are coming after them. And when they see something, they let everybody know. They have an alarm call because their job is to say twofold. Rest of the flock, watch out, there's something out there. And, hey, predator, the jig is up. I see you right there. You don't bother attacking us, we see you. So an alarm call is a noise that birds use to alert the flock and alert the predator. Chickadees are actually famous for their alarm calls. A lot of people know that chickadees get their name from the chickadee, right? Chickadee-dee-dee, like that. That, though, is not the song of the chickadee. Do you know that? That's not their song. That's an alarm call. Chickadees are extremely social birds. They have a lot of vocalizations. They talk to each other all the time. And they're constantly talking and looking about, trying to figure out where predators are. I'll just play this really quickly. Can you hear that, right? Okay. Chickadee-dee-dee, like that. One of the cool things that scientists know about chickadees is that they don't just say, hey, the predator. They can tailor their alarm calls to the threat coming at them. And so if you and I say we're walking outside, say we're walking out to stalk the feeder, chickadee's not really worried about us, right? But maybe wants to let the rest of the flock know that that there's something going on. There's a big weird person out there. They'll go chickadee, chickadee. Maybe they'll put 2 D's in there. But if it's a Cooper's hawk or a sharp-shinned hawk or some other thing that's really out to get them, an owl or something, they will throw a bunch of D's on the end of that. Chickadee, dee, 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 dee. You can see right here, that's the spectrograph down there. You can see for a large predator, chickadee, look, okay, we all get it. But for a small predator, one that's actually out to get them, they add a bunch of D's on there. This is a really interesting thing if you are out listening, right? If you're walking outside and you hear chickadees going crazy, putting a lot of D's on the end of their chickadee call, you should check out for a hawk. You should look around for an owl. This is something and a tip that birders use a lot, actually, in our own birding. Another bird that tips us off are crows, right? In the middle of this image is a barn owl, right? And then just crows just harassing the heck out of it, right? Crows, even though this owl is not a threat to the crow, crows just don't like anybody near them. They just don't want any other big birds around. And so these crows are what we call mobbing this owl. It's as simple as that. They just surround it, squawk at it, dive at it, harass it, do whatever they can do to get it the heck out of their territory. You see this a lot with owls. You see it with hawks. You see it with any sort of large bird that a crow identifies. As a birder, as anybody, if you hear a bunch of crows going berserk, you want to go check it out. Because that is the way that we get tipped off to an owl being around, right? Is you go follow the crows to whatever they're harassing. This happens to me, this happens to once a week if you're attuned to it. You'll follow the crows and then you'll see some poor, great horned owl or red-tailed hawk trying to find peace going somewhere else. Birders can also use alarm calls in a different way too, to basically trick birds to come out so you can see them. It's a little thing in birding called pishing. Man, this picture is 5 years old. It's the same hat. It's the same hat that I got. It's all right. And I almost wore that same orange thing. Anyway, that's good. Pishing, right? Okay. So here's the tough thing about birding. You're out there. There are your bird's whole job is to not be seen, right? If you're a sparrow, if you're a warbler, you stay out of sight, you stay on the ground, you don't want to be seen. So how, as me, a selfish birder, how am I going to see you? What do? Well, I can play a little trick. I can mimic an alarm call from a bird and get the birds to think that there's a predator around. They'll pop up and then I can see them. It's called pishing. It's a well-accepted trick. And what you do is you mimic the noise of, I think it's titmouse. And these alarm calls work across species, right? So if it's a mixed flock of birds moving, one of them gives an alarm call, all the birds understand that this is a threat out there. And so as a birder, if you go out there and you go psh, 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 like that, let's hear it. Yeah, anybody brave enough to try it, go for it. Psh, 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 psh. You can mix it up with like whatever it sounds like, sort of an alarming little bird noise. Birds will pop up. And it's awesome. When it works, which is like 20% of the time, you feel like the king of the jungle. And there have been times when I've been with non-birders and there's been like, not much going on. I'm like, check this out. And then a bunch of birds pop up and they're like, oh, I'm blown away. When it doesn't work, which is like 80% of the time, you feel like a real moron. And I would be careful not to do this in public if no birds are showing up, because then you're just standing by a bush going and it doesn't look cool. So pishing is mimicking an alarm call to get the birds to come over to you. All right, that's alarm call. Number 2 is contact calls. Contact calls are simply little calls made between birds, usually or often pairs of birds, to just check in, right? So cardinals, as we all know, travel around in pairs, male-female pairs all the time. They're always together. But again, being a bird is dangerous. You always want to keep track of where your partner is. Still there? We good? We checking in? It's like, like when you go on a trip, you call, you check in with your spouse or whatever. That's what contact calls are. Birds are constantly vocalizing to each other to check in on their partner, check in on rivals, check in on the rest of the flock, anything like that. Even though these aren't these are largely very simple sounds because they don't want to spend a lot of energy. They don't want to give their position away to potential predators, right? So this is really just like a noise, a quick, sharp noise that is useful between pairs. But it is one of the most common sounds you hear because these birds are always doing it. Cardinals are famous for it, and because we have so many cardinals around, and this Sibley app is broken because it doesn't do this thing. Anyway, cardinals is a one you hear a lot because it's a loud metallic tink. Like, it doesn't come across super well here. It's very loud. It sounds like a coin on a piece of, banging 2 coins together maybe. Very sharp and metallic. And you hear that a lot because cardinals, as I said, always move around in pairs. Another really popular one is, or once you get to know it, is the common yellowthroat. They have there's this beautiful little masked warbler. They live down in the sort of rank vegetation and the wet areas. Very common bird, yellowthroat, but often seen or heard first. And it's sort of a wet chat. That call, once you bird for a while, that call is like, I can feel it in my spine. I know exactly what that is, and they're a really common one. A couple others, Canada goose, right? That's what a honk is. A honk is just a contact call, right? A honk is just especially when you hear flocks of Canada geese flying together. We'll talk about flight calls in a minute, no spoilers. That's basically what they're doing. It's be like, honk, honk, honk. Everybody still together? I don't need to play the Canada goose honk. I think we all get it. Another one that I really love is the yellow-rumped warbler. This one is another one that doesn't come across as well over the phone, but they have this beautiful sort of water droppy call. They travel in loose flocks too, and are always sort of calling back and forth to each other. And this is one in person. Again, these sounds, but it sounds like a little water drop. Beautiful little birds. These are ones. So let me say 2. I should stop. It is May 2nd right now. Oof. This is the time that birders wait all year for. It is May. Birds are migrating back right now. This is prime time. And so when the sun goes down in a little bit, millions of birds will be taking off across America from the part south and will be coming over Rockland and be coming over all of Maine if the weather allows them to. I'll try to mix in some migration stuff as we go. Yellow-rumped warblers are already through, probably. Yellow-rumped warblers are famous as being one of the first migrants through, and so they're probably around in their, the tail end of their migration right now. Canada geese are, who knows what they're doing. Yeah, they're just, who knows? They're at the golf. They're playing golf. They're at the golf course. Another type of call is a flight call. So these are sounds that birds give in flight. Not all birds give flight calls, but it is helpful for birds that do to know it, because you can understand which birds are coming over. And a lot of times birds in flight are obviously very hard to identify, especially small birds. And so for the birds that give flight calls, it's really helpful to understand them, because then you know which ones are going over. American goldfinch gives a flight call. And okay, there's in Maine, in any given year, 350 different species of birds plus, right? They all have all of these different calls, songs. It's impossible to remember them all. So we're constantly coming up with tricks to try to help us remember them. One of the ways that you can help remember an American goldfinch flight call is because it sounds, and I need you to bear with me, like it's saying potato chip. Okay? It sounds sort of like it's saying potato chip. It goes, "Toot, toot, toot, toot. Potato chip, potato chip." Right? Do you know what I'm talking about? Potato chip. In here, it's actually listed as per TTT flight call. But if you think potato chip, okay, so just listen and just try to fit. Ready? Potato chip. Okay, right? Sort of. We have to make it work. It's the rhythm. Potato chip. Right. It's the rhythm of potato chip.
Although sometimes it sounds like there was an extra syllable.
Don't worry about that syllable. Yeah, that's not you get if you hear potato chip, even if there's potato chip, then you're still good. Yeah. That's really helpful because there are tons of goldfinches around. Tons and tons and tons. One of the most common birds. But if you don't see them, they're so small, if you don't see them clearly, you may not know just how numerous they are. And so that flight call is really helpful. Potato chip and dip. Potato chip dip. There we go. I love it. I love it. Good call. I'm getting hungry just thinking about it. I should say too, when we talk about spring migration, goldfinches are not migrants. A lot of people aren't aware of that because they look so different in the fall and winter, right? The way I sort of, they're a great example, I think. So in the winter, Maine Audubon always gets these calls saying, "My goldfinches are gone. Where'd they go? And what are these weird green birds that are here now?" Right? And we have to explain it to them about right now, spring, May 2nd, it's breeding time. This is when all the birds get together and impress their mates and build nests and have eggs and babies. And to do that, to impress their mates, that first step, a lot of them look as good as they can, right? They put on their fancy costumes. Like, if you go to the prom, you put on your fanciest gown. Once the breeding season is over, right, the birds don't need to impress their mates. And those of us who've been married before know, once you're married, you're not putting on that gown. That gown's not coming out anymore, right? And so they basically go into their sweatpants in the fall and winter. It costs a lot of energy. It takes energy to put on to make these bright, beautiful feathers, and you're more visible to predators. And so there's a benefit to molting out of your breeding feathers when you don't need to impress anybody. But right now in the spring, when the goldfinches at my feeders are looking like this, is it awesome? And they do look so much better than in the fall. So anyway, potato chip, keep it in mind. Another one that's helpful are these guys here. Shout it out if you know it. Cedar waxwings. Not the same individual that was being murdered before. Cedar waxwings, absolutely beautiful birds, but ones that you never quite know where they're going to be at any one time. They're famously sort of nomadic. Well, they will sort of descend on a bush and eat everything there and then cruise on to the next one. So there's always a bird that people are like, "Where can I see cedar waxwings?" And I'm like, "I'm not sure, actually." But if you learn their flight call, it really helps to identify them because they give their flight call all the time. It sounds like a whistle, right? It's a really simple, straightforward whistle. Yeah. Just a really straight, clean, squeaky sound. Like a whistle, and they fly in these tight flocks. So another way to identify birds, we're not going to talk about it today, but is flight style. So woodpeckers, they do the flap, 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 and glide like that. Always do that. Other birds do other things, but cedar waxwings always fly in a tight ball together, giving that whistle. And so otherwise, when they're flying, they look like any other bird, really, starlings or whatever. But once they give that whistle, flight call, that's how you can tell. Another one that I really love is eastern bluebird. You all have bluebirds up in this neck of the woods, I assume, right? They have what I think of as a sort of memorable flight call to me, which is like this woo woo woo, woo woo. Gets sort of up and down a loop. They're really vocal birds, and one that I often hear first. And so if you hear that call, try to remember it. Woo woo. The other, is that working? The other type of flight call is, of course, calls that birds give when they're migrating. So this is happening right now, right, over our head all night long. Most passerines migrate at night. Basically, everything migrates at night except for our hawks and raptors. The reason generally is because it's clearer at night. The weather is generally better. There are fewer predators around to try to capture them. And birds use stars to navigate, right? So they're flying at night. The trouble at night is you can't see anything. And so birds are constantly calling to each other thousands of feet up in the air to just be like, north, going north? We still this way? Is it still this way? All the time. Sometimes that can be Canada geese. You can hear Canada geese migrating all the time. But people who are really good birders can go out on a night like tonight, probably, maybe if it was a little clearer, and listen and hear small passerines giving chip notes to each other. Like all contact calls and flight calls, especially like these are essentially contact calls that are given in flight. They're very simple and they're very difficult. You have to have a much better brain than me to sort of separate a Blackburnian warbler night flight call from a black-throated blue night flight call. They're very difficult, but science helps. And there are programs where you could run a microphone on your roof or wherever, and then download the data into Raven or a similar program and see what type of birds are migrating over your house. Pretty cool. Because when it comes to the spectrograph, the calls, which all sound, like if you were to hear all these calls, you'd be like, that's the same sound over and over, look actually very different. And you can identify very clearly what the different birds are from their spectrograph. Yeah, that's a very cool thing to do if you want to. The other type of call is begging. Any parents intuitively will know what this is when you hear it. This happens in midsummer, so this is right now the birds are coming back, they're going to lay their eggs, the eggs are going to hatch, then the babies will be whining for food. And it's a noise you actually hear a lot. We have a lot of people, a lot of times as a birder, when I'm walking around in the woods, I hear weird noises. It's a bird begging because they make noises that you don't expect, weird noises. And so listening for the sound of a begging juvenile bird is another vocalization you might hear. But then, of course, is the songs. Songs are probably the most distinctive and familiar of all the bird sounds. Some are long and elaborate, some are quick and easy. They are used to attract mates. They're used to defend a territory, discourage intruders, any number of things. Given by both males and females, though generally males give them more often, sing more often. But there's all different kinds. I mentioned at the top that the chickadee of the chickadee is not their song, right? Does anybody know what their song is? Here's the song of a chickadee. You will recognize it.
Oh, yeah.
That's their song.
You tell that when the baby sounds so much like, oh.
Great call. Good call. So that's the chickadee song. It's basically saying Phoebe, Phoebe. Well, what about the other bird, our eastern phoebe? Looks like this little flycatcher, another early migrant, back right now. Here's what the phoebe song is. A little higher, a little faster. Phoebe. Not quite as musical, maybe, a little more insistent. Yeah. Love that sound. This is one of my favorite sounds of all in all birding because they are early migrants that come back in March. And when you hear your first phoebe of the year, you're like, we did it. We did it. We made it through this terrible Maine winter, and we're back onto something good. So that's the chickadee song. That's what it uses to attract its mates. There are so many songs out there that it's tough to figure out which ones to talk about. So I'm going to break them down in a couple options. And we can fight over this if you guys want. I'm fine. We'll take it to the mat. Prettiest. What's the prettiest song? I don't know. Common loons are up there probably. Maine Audubon does a lot of work to protect common loons. We've had loon project going since 1983. Common loon population in Maine is doing great. Maine is the, well, they're great. Forget what I was going to say. And they're beautiful songsters. It's some of the most evocative sounds you've ever heard a loon calling, especially like at dusk. One of the most evocative sounds you can get. They have a bunch of different calls, and I'll play some of them. There's this one. This is called the yodel call. This is often given between different pairs of loons on a lake. So this is basically sort of a contact call that's given between pairs, territorially checking in, be like, Johnson's, you good? Still alive down on that end? Robinson's down there. This is the whale call, which serves a similar purpose. It's a tremolo call. This is the one that actually they use to seduce and find mates, also to warn off folks coming into their territories. And this finally, this hoot call, this is their sort of in-family contact call. So this is what they just give to each other. That's like the little cardinal check-in hoot noise. Beautiful songs, evocative, the soundtrack of a Maine summer for sure. But not the only beautiful option. Maine is home to a number of thrushes that have very beautiful songs, famously beautiful songs. Thrushes are basically the size and shape of a robin, although instead of having the orange breast, most of them look like this, brown back, spotted, some number. There's degrees of this. There's like 6 species in Maine. They all are some variation of this, often very hard to tell apart. The wood thrush has like very dark spots and dark back. A veery is the lightest with the lightest spots. This is a Swainson's thrush. I can tell because he's got some buff around his eye ring there. But all of them have beautiful songs. They have this flute-like song that echoes out of the woods in the middle of summer. Here's a Swainson's thrush. You heard that before? I'll play another one. Here's a hermit thrush. Classic. So prettiest, I'm sure there are other contenders out there. I'm welcome to debate you afterwards, but they're up there for me. On the other end of the spectrum, I was actually asked by NPR a bunch of years ago to make a list of the dumbest bird sounds. I don't know why, but they did. You can go online and find it if you want to. And so I thought long and hard. You know, to our ears, not every bird sounds wonderful. And some of them are downright silly. My winner is a bird that does not live in Maine at all. It's this bird, a ground-dwelling grouse called a willow ptarmigan that lives in Newfoundland and across to Alaska, places like that, up in the tundra. Very cool bird. They molt really dramatically seasonally. Where in the winter they'll be a pure white. In different seasons they'll have brownish and black to match the things around them. And like a lot of grouse, they dance on leks, right? So they sort of clear a space and then do a little display with a dance and a song, a sound, something, whatever we're going to call this, that apparently somehow works to attract mates. I think it's one of the silliest noises I've ever heard in my life, and it was my number one dumbest bird sound. It sounds like aliens arguing or something. So if you're a lady ptarmigan, you're like, oh, yeah, hello. There is another very dumb bird sound, which is a little closer to heart. And I'm sorry to do this all to us, but okay. Seabirds are not known for their vocal repertoire. They spend their whole lives out on the middle of the ocean where it's loud and there's waves crashing and they can't even hear each other to begin with. So they haven't had to evolve beautiful songs. The only time they come to land, the only time they use their voices at all is when they come to land and breed on colonies like off Maine, right? So proud of our beautiful Atlantic puffins. We're the only state that has them. They're wonderful, but they do not sound cool. They do not. It's not a beautiful song. The way it is described on this scientific app is chainsaw snores. Okay? I didn't come up with that. So here is the beautiful song of our Atlantic puffin. That's it does. It was like me after Thanksgiving. Yeah. There we go. So look, I love them, but let's be serious here. A couple other superlatives. Fastest song. Wrens are awesome. Wrens are teeny tiny birds that have outsized personalities. Huge. It could probably beat us all up if you want to, or a little wren. This is a winter wren, smaller than a mouse, tiny little brown bird, lives in the forest. In your backyard, you'll have house wrens coming in. If they're not here yesterday, they'll be here tomorrow. Carolina wrens are probably, I'm sure, up this far, new arrival in Maine. But the winter wren is famous for having the fastest song, I think. I haven't measured this scientifically, it's just me. I love their song. It sounds like a mouse on speed playing the violin, I think. Okay, so here's a song of a winter wren. Crazy. I love it. Very cool. They are singing out in the woods right now, so if you're somewhere nice anytime soon, you could hear that crazy sound. You may never see them because they're so tiny. They live on the ground. They hide out in sort of logs or underneath piles of stuff, and so they're very hard to see, but they are not hard to hear. Loudest song. I don't know that this is true. I think this is my bet for the loudest bird in Maine, at least. Anybody know what this is? Nope.
Heron?
Close. This is a bittern. Bittern, American bittern. Bitterns are egrets, herons, but instead of being big and tough like a great blue heron that doesn't have to worry about much, or coming out at night like a night heron, they are super camouflaged, super camouflaged. Very cool birds. Their whole deal is that they look like this. They go stand in sort of a grassy reed patch and just go like this the whole time. They're really hard to see because they blend in so well. They live on bogs and marshes, right? Open lakes, which is a tough place to attract a mate, right? Because if you are standing on one end of the lake and your potential mate is way over the other end, you got to figure out how to let them know you're there. And so they have established evolved this very cool, loud sound, where they start by pumping a bunch of air into their bodies and then basically bellowing it out, like this huffing sound that huffs across the entire lake and is extremely loud and awesome. The first time I heard this, we have a family hunting camp up on near Shirley Mills, Maine. It's a great bog. I was scared out of my mind because this is not a bird sound that you hear very often, but is a loud and cool sound. So I'm going to play it. What you're going to hear first is the birds sucking in air and his bill like clacking. He huffs it in, he clacks, and then he starts pumping it out in this big bellow. Weird. So cool. That's it, and it's much louder than that in person. You can hear it from miles away, and because they have developed these acoustics to really pump it up. No, what it was. Yeah, it sounds mechanical almost, or it sounds, I don't know, not like a bird. Yeah, you're right.
It doesn't make sense to have all that camouflage and then tell everybody where you are.
Exactly. Exactly. And they can't, they're not going up and doing a flight display or anything. You got to get it out there some way. Most confusing, I don't know. They're all confusing to me. The famously most confusing birds are what we call the trillers, which includes this set of birds. That's a pine warbler, the yellow warbler, and then a chipping sparrow in the middle and a swamp sparrow there in the end. All of these birds sing a variation of like that. And I've been birding for many moons. And if I'm out with someone, they go, well, which one is that? I'll go like, I didn't hear it. I don't know. It's very hard to tell them apart, even for pros. I'll play them if you want. And honestly, when I play them on the phone, they're like, that sounds easy. That's really, they sound different. But in person, they don't. Here's a pine warbler, which is a bit of a sweeter one. It's very pretty. It's a little sweeter and sugarier than those. I will say that each individual birds have different styles. For example, this chipping sparrow, it'll sound one way here, but they sing a wide variety of different trills like this. So you hear that's faster? It's not always like that. But yeah, I get shivers just looking at this slide. I want to move on. Most incredible. I give mockingbirds a lot of grief sometimes. They're the state bird of like 8 different states, which is ridiculous because they're just sort of like dumpster birds. No disrespect, but that's a little disrespectful, I guess. But it's true. But they are incredible. They're incredible. Northern mockingbirds are mockingbirds. They are mimics, and their ability to mimic different birds is mind-blowing, truly. Scientists don't know why mockingbirds mimic. It's kind of a confusing strategy if you're trying to attract a mate, because how do they know what's going on, and what's the advantage of of singing something else? I don't really know, but they do it, and they do it incredibly well. And a cool thing, once you learn bird songs, is listening to mockingbirds and identifying, ticking off the list of all the things they're doing. It's really cool. We'll try some of that here, and this doesn't always work perfectly, but we'll try our best. So here's a mockingbird song, and I'll try to call out a little bit when I can hear different birds in there. It's a blue jay. Also blue jay. So blue jay. Okay. That's an alarm. That's a robin at the end. So all of those were, that's a mockingbird song. All of those were parts of other birds' songs. You heard that blue jay was one of the most common ones that was singing in there. A cool thing about blue jays is that they are also mimics, believe it or not. I will play this blue jay song, and we'll listen for a particular thing in here. Hold on, wait, which one am I looking for? Here we go. Okay, so the parts of this were inside that mockingbird's call, but here's a different call here called the hawk imitation. That's a blue jay doing that. And here is the bird it's doing. That's the copy right there. That's a red-shouldered hawk. So pretty cool. Birds mimic each other. We don't really know why. Blue jays just thought they'd do that to get the advantage that a hawk would have, right? If a hawk is calling, all the other birds clear out. So at my feeders, I have blue jays coming in and doing hawk calls to just clear stuff out, I think, right? They get all the food to themselves. So those are the songs. One critical part here is how do we remember all these things? It's really hard. Let me talk through a couple of the ways traditionally that birders have tried to remember them. We started with this, reading the phonetic description in field guides. This is not the easiest way to learn bird calls. Rarely are you out with your friends and you go, hey, did you hear that pleasing soft phrase of mellow whistles? Chitty woo, widdy woo. It's not a great way to learn. Everybody know what bird that is? Shitty woo woody woo. That's what they're describing. Eastern bluebird. Eastern bluebird. Is that what you said? Did you get it? Yeah, well done. But for the longest time, back in the day especially, this is what you had to do. You had to look at the description and be like, yeah, I guess that was pleasing, really tough to do. Graduated to this. This, when you're bumping this in downtown Portland out of your, this CD out of your car, pretty cool in the old port, rocking this. So you would listen to CDs, right? So you had these CDs or records or whatever, and it would go Eastern Bluebird, and then Western Bluebird. And that's really hard. That's a really hard way to learn. But that's what I started doing that. I would just drive around, just listen. You just try to do it by osmosis almost, or memorization. Really hard. We're getting better these days with digital tools that can help us learn bird calls. The app I've been using is called the Sibley mobile app on my phone. It has all these calls right here, which is great. Really helps you learn the different types of calls. The thing about the CD like this, it's the song and that's it generally. So all the other songs we talked about, contact calls that are identifiable or other calls that you encounter in the world, you don't get them on these discs, and so it's really hard that way. That's Sibley. Another app that I started out using is called Larkwire. This is one that tests you, quizzes you. So it's got all these quizzes. You can learn first what different birds fall in different categories, and then you can practice and learn and listen. Because for the longest time, and we'll talk about how this has shifted in a minute, if you wanted to know what a bird song was out in the world, you had to learn them. You had to keep them all in your head. And so Larkwire, for those folks who are still interested in doing that, is very helpful. But the game has changed a little bit. This is called Merlin. Who uses Merlin here? Everybody. Got to. It's been unbelievable, frankly, how this has swept the birding world in the last 2 years. Merlin, for those who don't know, is Shazam. Everybody remember Shazam, the app? You used to hold it up in a bar when they were playing a song and it'd tell you what song it was. It's that, but for birds. And it's remarkable. So you press play, you hold it up outside, and it tells you what species you're calling. It's really good. It's gotten really good. When it first was released, it was sort of not perfect. It's gotten really good, and it's really changed the game. For I won't say worse, but for better, certainly. There are way more people who are able to identify the birds out back. You get interested in birds when you know what they are, right? So it's not just this wall of noise. You can start to. So it's really helping people learn more about the birds in the backyard. The people like even me who, had to fight in the trenches and listen to stupid CDs in our car are kind of like, oh, that's cheating. That's not so fair. You got to learn it. You got to learn it yourself. And so it still is important to learn, I think, because it's really cool to know what these things are and not just look at your phone. But Merlin helps incredibly. I think birding itself, experience, getting out there, listening to the birds is always the best way to learn. Because constantly you will hear birds and then you can track them down and you have the satisfaction of matching the thing you heard to the species you're looking at in person. So birding is still the best way to do it. Okay, I have 15 minutes left. I'm going to do some of these. And what I will do, so I have a bunch of slides here about some common songs or sounds. Also, this is the time if you want to just shout out birds, if you're like, either I'm hearing this noise in my backyard, what is it? Which has never worked in the history of people asking me. And when they go, it's like this, blah, 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 blah. But we can try. Or if you have a particular species you want to ask about, let me know. But there are a couple that we get questions about a lot at Maine Audubon. Tufted titmouse is one of them. We hear a lot of people coming to me saying, I hear this noise. What is it? What is this thing? It's a lot of times it's a titmouse. Titmouse they're very loud and clear, that you can hear them from a long way away, but you don't see them often. Sometimes they're up in a tree or whatever. One of the things they say is Peter, Peter, right? Peter, Peter. Yep, like that. There are other calls that they give too, including that pish that I was talking about before. But that clear Peter, Peter, especially this time of year, is one that you should be aware of. This darn app is. Another one we get lots of calls about, especially last month or in March, are robins. Robins are famous and or infamous for a couple things, being very loud and singing earliest in the morning of any bird and latest at night. So in the springtime, after a long winter, we start getting calls being like, how can I shut these robins up that are waking me up? There's a robin outside my window and it's calling every single second and I want it to stop. And we say, deal with it. I don't know, cover your ears, whatever. It's just doing its thing. Robins are cool. They're very vocal. They are part of that thrush family I was talking about before. So they have actually, they're not sort of as renowned for their songsters, but they have a lot of the same ideas in their songs as Swainson's thrush and Veery and others. We'll try a couple here. Some people are getting reactions to it, yeah. Yeah, that very sort of whistled, phrasey, individual phrases there. There's a couple more that I'll play. One is they give sort of a horse-like whinny. Right, you've heard that? A bit of an alarm call and sort of a social call. Then also this pup call. That's a really common one. So all of those are ones that you will hear tomorrow morning, I guarantee it. So are good ones to know. This is another one you hear. A delightful little noise, a very common one. Often, can you do it? Let's hear it, let's go. Yeah, that was awesome. Good job. Well done. That takes bravery to do that. Mourning doves, of course, get their name from this sound, which is a sort of a mournful cry here. It is a little loon-like. Yeah, sort of a quiet, muffled loon a little bit. Mourning dove, right there. That's a very common one, and one you, again, will probably hear tomorrow morning or tonight even. I was just talking about sparrows before people got here. Sparrows usually have a very complicated set of songs. I would say difficult. There's a lot of different sparrows in Maine. They are all some variation of brown on the back. They all stay out of sight all the time, so learning their songs is really important. The most common sparrow song we hear is the song sparrow. This is our probably most familiar sparrow. I'm sure if I were to look closely, I could probably see one out on the yard out there. They're called song sparrows. Their song is a good one to know. It's a little complicated, but the way I think of it is having two parts. It starts almost always the same way, which is a set of slow introductory notes. Ba-deep, 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 like that. And then a tumble off into a jumble of things that are never the same twice. So it'll be like, ba-deep, 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 blah, 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 dee, 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 blah, 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 blah. This is terrible. Let me just play it. Okay, so think of it in two halves. Right? Okay? So if you think of it as not like, don't worry about the particular notes, but worry about the structure of it, where it starts with a slow set of intro notes and then a tumble of things that are different every time, that's a song sparrow. And for me, when I hear those first notes, you start to immediately know what you're after. That's one that's extremely common. Let me end here. Well, maybe a couple more. Owls. We have a couple owls in Maine. These are our two biggest breeding owls. Barred owl over there with the dark eyes and the yellow bill, and great horned owl over here with the tufts. Awesome songs, both very identifiable. The barred owl. Folks have heard barred owls before? Raise your hand. Yeah. Famous for sounding like it's saying, "Who cooks for you? Who cooks for you all? Who cooks for you?" Cooked for you. Very cool sound. Great horned owl is another common one. I can't really describe this any other way of just like classic hoots. This is just like you're watching a show and it's set in a cemetery. This is the sound you're getting, right? This is like classic owl hoots. Spooky cemetery sound. Yeah. So those are the two to look out for. Another one actually that I'll play up here, the smallest breeding owl in Maine is called the saw-whet owl. Saw-whet owl. It looks like this, and it's basically that size. Maybe that size. A beautiful little bird, one that you almost never see unless you're out banding for it or trying to capture it. But one that you do hear. It gets its name because apparently it sounds like a saw-whet, something they used to sharpen saws back in the day, which is like a wheel that goes around and then strikes the metal at every turn. They give this just rapid series of toots. So it's, if you think about a guy sharpening his thing, it's like, this is what it sounds like. So not particularly owl-like, maybe, but this is the most numerous owl in Maine, for sure. And one that you could have breeding in your backyards, depending on what you got. So listen out for that one. All right, we have 6 minutes officially on the docket, right? So let me stop, and if we don't have questions, I can keep going. But if there are questions, like from the Zoom too, let me know. Yeah.
The Zoom did have one request to hear a Sora.
Oh, okay.
You want to
Awesome.
play that?
Good call. A sora is a little aquatic bird. It's like a little rail, walks along the rank vegetation there. Also very hard to see. It gives a couple calls. One is this cool whinny. Wild. It's called a sora, S-O-R-A. Here's their other one. And this is one, again, if you go to a place that has a lot of reeds or aquatic grass, freshwater, you will not see these birds. They do not, well, maybe we'll talk about a way you can see them. But very often you do not see them. You will hear this call. They are out there in the grass doing their best to never be seen. But those, that whinny and that coo-wee are a thing you can call. If you did, which is what a lot of birders do, play that song near where soras are, they may fly out and jump on you. A lot of rails like this are very territorial, and if they hear the noise of another bird, even if it's played from a recording, they will come right out and like walk on the ground below you. Do so at caution. I can't recommend you do that, but I've seen it done many times. Other questions? Yeah, you question?
I have often been out at night and heard barred owls and tried to imitate them.
Mhm.
It just gets to sound like a conversation. Is that my imagination? Are they just doing what they would do anyway, or is it possible that they're responding to
Well, let me put it to you. Let's hear it, and we'll judge.
I have to be
Sure. It's hard to say. So I've done that same thing where I've gone out and I've heard a bird go "Ba-la-la, ba-la-la," and then when it's quiet, I go "Ba-la-la-la," and then it goes again, and I'm like, oh, we're talking to each other. But really, they're just going, and I'm just going in the quiet spot. But at the same time, I have heard people call owls, and then the owl will fly in. And very clearly, and the birders do this all the time, if you play the noise of an owl or many other species, that species comes right in because it thinks that there's another challenger on its territory. A couple weeks ago, very early in owl season, I was out in the woods with some friends and we played a barred owl. We were like, I wonder if there are any barred owls around. We played a call, and like a dragon out of the woods came this barred owl. It's sweeping right over our heads. So it depends on how good you are, I think, is the answer to that question. But either way, just, if it's fun, just pretend that you're having a conversation. That works for you. Feels good. Any other questions? Yes, sir. A great blue heron was on my list that I submitted to NPR of dumbest sounding birds, I will tell you. They, again, are not, they are not known for their song. They essentially don't really have a song. They have a flight call, which they give when they're flushed. It sounds like a nightmare. Just, and if you've ever been walking along and not seen a group of hair and then flushed it, it's loud and scary and pterodactyline. And so, yeah, that's what it's basically a hoarse croak like that. It's not great. Yeah. Yeah, I'll go you and, yep. Yep.
So, I think it's the white-throated.
Anybody hearing that around?
Every now and then, it sounds like I hear one that goes down, like it goes into a minor.
Sure.
Is that the same?
It's the same. A lot of birds, especially what we're talking about is a white-throated sparrow. Beautiful bird, looks like this. They are in right now. So, yeah, the cool thing about bird migration is that, especially in spring, it's like down to the day. Like we know when what species are moving. White-throated sparrows, it's today's the day, right? Tons of white-throated sparrows on the move. So they are around right now, and they don't breed in our backyards. So they're practicing their songs right now, especially, they're warming up, not having used them for very long. And so you'll hear white-throated sparrows give a lot of variation in their calls right now. Most of the time it sounds like this, right? In America, we say it sounds like, "Oh, sweet Peabody," or "Oh, Sam Peabody." In Canada, they say, "Oh, sweet Canada," which it doesn't sound like at all. But if you talk to any Canadian birders, like, yeah, it's saying, "Oh, sweet Canada." It's like, what are you talking about? Weirdo. So, yeah, great, beautiful, beautiful song. And they are practicing right now as they're warming up on the way north.
I've been hearing that sort of the alternative one where they kind of go into the minor key.
Yeah, let me see if any of these. Like, this guy's just bad at it. I don't know what he's even doing. There you go. Yeah, there's a lot of variation, and that's another frustrating thing that I don't even like to get into on this, is variation in birdsong, which there's a lot of. And that just takes practice and experience to know, like, that's not a different species, that's just the same species doing a slightly different thing. It's just tough. Yeah. Did you just have one? Yeah, bald eagle, also on my list of dumbest. We're hitting all the hits here. Bald eagle, it's not the dumbest, it's just like when you see a bald eagles are majestic as heck, right? They're awesome. I was driving up and I was driving by Freeport. Where there's that like Maine idle motor court? You know what I'm talking about in Freeport? There's a beaver bog right there. On the top of the beaver lodge was a bald eagle sitting right by the highway. It was awesome. Anyway, they're very majestic birds, but they don't sound. Their sound does not fit their personality, I think. So much so that it's a real trope in birding and in movies to show a bald eagle but then play the sound of a red-tailed hawk. Because bald eagles, they just don't sound that cool. That's it. Sounds like a gull. That's all you got, really? And so, I don't know. I mean, it's just sort of a disappointing call. Here, obviously, is, pretend you're in a Western movie and you're panning out over the landscape. Yeah. So, anyway, yeah, that's bald eagle. Anyone else? Or from the Zoom? Yeah. Yeah, they do. They have, just like us, they have vocal cords and voice boxes and those type of things. Some birds actually have evolved much more intricate ones than we do. For example, everybody's least favorite bird is the brown-headed cowbird. But the brown-headed cow, so they're famously notorious for laying their eggs in other birds' nests. The reason they do that, by the way, is because they evolved originally to follow herds of large mammals like bison in the US. And the thing about following bison is that it's tough to have a nest, right? Because you have a nest and then the herd moves away and you're like, well, I got this nest over here, now you're 100 miles away. And so they lay their eggs in other birds' nests. And so they say, like, I got to stay with my herd. You take care of this. Thank you. That's where they get that parasitism from, parasitism. But they famously have, and it's sort of hard to hear, and like a double voice box where they can play a set of low sounds and a set of high sounds at the same time, which is sort of unique. We'll see. So we'll listen to this in two parts. There's like, oh my God, stupid app. There's like this, and then it goes, to us, that maybe sounds like a cool thing they're doing, but it's actually an evolved thing to have two completely separate sounds coming from separate places in their bodies. So they have, and I've seen an illustration of how it's done. It's some crazy flange. I don't know. I'm not but so yes, essentially the same way that we have it, sometimes modified in different ways. Yep.
Can you play the catbirds meow?
Sure, I can, and I'm sure. There's catbird. My favorite bird too. Love catbirds. Get their name from the fact they meow like a cat. There's another call first, and then there'll be the meow on here. Hold on. It really does sound like a cat. I love catbirds so much. They are mischievous little birds. They're cheeky a little bit. They got a little red butt patch down there. I really enjoy those guys. So we're over time. Is that feeling okay? What else do people want to hear? Anything else? Sure. A famous one. Another early migrant. Conqueree, they say. Conqueree. Cool birds. Blackbirds, the Icterid blackbird family is famous for their songs. The brown-headed cowbird is part of that. Red-winged blackbird is part of that. Another one is bobolink, which is sort of a famously threatened bird in Maine as their field habitat leaves. What? Take it easy. Take it easy. Very cool. How about the woodcock? Sure. Oh, one of my favorites. Woodcocks are, everybody know what a woodcock looks like? One of the weirdest birds we have. It's sort of a highly evolved shorebird, uses their long bill to dig for worms, like in the woods. They're like not really at wet areas. They are famous for their crazy displays. So in March, they will come and do these elaborate display flights with a couple parts to it. First is the most identifiable call of theirs is this peent, peent thing. But the other thing they do, do you hear that? That is actually their wings making that noise. And so they will fly, and as part of this flight display, we'll do this cool wing whistle thing that's called, and do the display. Here's the whole display. The bird will be in the dark, up in the air, doing this crazy set of noises in the air, and then it'll land and go and start painting. Another popular one that was mentioned earlier that also has a wing, a sound made by their wings is the nighthawk. So they do this thing called they also fly around at night, doing a similar thing as woodcocks, going here, similar thing, but wait for this boom at the end. Hear that? That's their wings. They bomb. Do it again. They bomb down, and they have these special wing feathers that the air rushes over and makes that noise. Pretty cool.
Hummingbirds make any
Yeah, they do. Hummingbirds make a ton of noise. Hummingbirds are very ornery. They're always battling each other. They're always fighting stuff off. And noises are a real part of that. This is ruby-throated hummingbird. This is, of course, the only one that breeds here. Here's their call. And that's basically a contact call. So that is basically they're chirping to each other around the flower or your feeders as they're being like, get out of my way, I want this nectar. That's just their wings cranking, yeah. They also will, so that irritating sounding one is when they're chasing each other off. And so you'll often see this at your feeders. If there's more than one there, one will just fly, just escort them somewhere else. Yeah, they do. They need it. They need that fuel for sure. All right. Well, last one. If anyone wants one last one, yes. And we got. Well, do two more. Two more. Who cares? Veery, sure. Veery. So I wrote a book called the American Birding Association Field Guide to the Birds of Maine. Pick it up at any good bookstore. And face this challenge that I mentioned at the beginning of how do you write the sounds of birds in this book. It's really hard to do. It was the hardest part by far of the book. I asked my friend Michael Tucker, help me with the veery. He said, I have a good one for veery. For me, a veery sounds like the sound of a video game character dying. Okay, so here's what that sounds like. No? So the sound of a veery, veeries are related to the Mason's thrush. It does. But it veers downward. That's where they get their name. Like that. It's a cool sound. I think it's actually my favorite of all those Catharus thrushes. All right. Yep. Sure. Whippoorwill. Another onomatopoeic bird. Whippoorwills again are like nighthawks are in the goatsucker nightjar family of aerial insectivores. So they fly around at night with their mouths open, gobbling stuff up, and incessantly, like 1,000 times a night, they will just say, "Whip poor Will, whip poor Will." All night long. Really cool. They're close. Another species of them that we don't have in Maine, I've heard of one in Maine ever, is a bird called a Chuck Will's widow. Chuck Will's widow. Chuck Will's widow. There we go. All right. Thanks everyone for coming. This is great.
Thank you, Nick. That was great. Thanks.